Grace is a 17-year-old girl who strictly adheres to her family's rules, living a life constrained by strict religious beliefs and household regulations, including prohibitions on makeup, tight jeans, parties, or interacting with boys. Welcome to the Alpha's Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. 1. My blonde hair up in a ponytail, I looked in the mirror and shrugged. I was 17 now, but not much had changed since I was 7. I mean, sure, I grew taller, my body changed, but the rules were pretty much the same. No makeup, no piercings, no parties, no boys. Those were things sinful children did. I checked to make sure I had everything I needed before zipping my bag up, slinging it over my shoulder, and heading downstairs. I met my mum in the kitchen, frying pancakes. "Good morning, Mum." I kissed her cheek and grabbed a plate. I noticed her nose wrinkling at my choice of clothes. I had worn jeans. I wasn't allowed to wear jeans. They were tight and showed off too much of the body. My parents said, "Good morning, dear," she finally replied, not saying anything about the jeans. I put 2 pancakes on my plate and grabbed the syrup before plopping down on one of the stools around the kitchen counter. "Good morning, family," Dad said, coming into the kitchen. He was already dressed for work in a blue button-up shirt, tucked neatly into black slacks. He kissed Mum on the cheek like I had and plopped down at the kitchen counter, opposite me, and Mum put a plate piled with pancakes in front of him. I finished chewing before greeting him. Good girls don't talk with food in their mouth. "Good morning, Grace. Please pass the syrup," he said while reading the headlines of the morning paper. "Stranger things in Wood's new curfew enforced." I shivered. "We just had to move to Valley Hill, didn't we?" My father got transferred to the Valley Hill branch of the company he worked for. We just arrived in town 2 days ago. So yes, I was starting my senior year of high school in a completely new environment. Lucky me. "We'll pray for the town," I said, knowing Daddy would be happy I said that. He smiled at me, nodding in agreement, and I ate the last piece of my pancake. I took a gulp of orange juice and grabbed my bag. I had 30 minutes till school started and I had to walk. "Bye, Mum." "Bye, Dad." I headed to the door. "God be with you, honey," I heard Mum calling out after me. I closed the door and patted my pocket, making sure I had my key. Valley Hill was a really pretty town, quaint. The town was surrounded by woods. Thick woods with tall green trees that you could barely see the top of. It was a town with one of everything. One supermarket, where you got everything you used on a semi-daily basis. One small mall where you could get clothes, shoes, the result being almost everybody dressed alike. One gas station. You get the idea. The walk wasn't long, about 7 to 10 minutes. "Welcome to Valley Hill High School, home of the Wolves." The big sign in front of the school read. A few students milled about, talking in groups. These were people who'd known each other since birth. Who went to the same kindergarten, the same middle school. I was going to stick out like a sore thumb. As I walked towards the building, people stared at me not so discreetly, whispers going round. I kept my head down and walked faster. The office was pretty easy to find. It was bland as expected. The room was a combination of beige walls and hardwood floors. A radio crackled noisily in a corner. "Good morning, dear. You're the new girl, I presume?" The secretary pulled a file from a drawer and read the name Tamara finally. I nodded. "Okay. I'm Mrs. Cooley, but you can call me Gladys. Here's your schedule. You have English first. So, you'll want to take your right at the end of the hallway. It's the 3rd door on your left." I smiled and thanked her. My locker wasn't that hard to find. I dumped my books in there, making a mental note to bring stuff to stick on and bring some life into it. I followed Gladys' directions and found my English class. There were just a few people in the class since the bell hadn't been rung. All eyes snapped to me as I stepped into the class. There were a group at the back, 4 boys and 2 girls. I ignored them and chose a desk front and center. The bell rang and more students started coming in and taking their seats. A middle-aged woman walked in, her hair pulled back in a low bun, glasses balanced on her nose, sensible shoes clacking on the floor. She gave me a nod, but otherwise didn't acknowledge me, and I was glad. I didn't need more attention. I heard the chair next to me dragging, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw somebody settling into it. I felt the person's eyes on me. My stomach squirmed. I braved a peek at the person and found myself looking into deep grey eyes. A boy. His eyes seemed to be pulling me in. They were so warm and calm. I snapped my head back to the front, heart thumping. I'd seen those eyes before. 2. I walked into the cafeteria, assessing the crowd. Somehow, my mind went back to the grey-eyed guy. I had rushed out of the class immediately the bell had been rung, not giving myself a chance to give in to curiosity and talk to him. The dreams had started a few months after my 16th birthday. It wasn't really clear. I'd be running in the woods, laughing, and beside me, running too, were grey eyes. I couldn't see any other feature of the person. Just the eyes. I chose a table at the far back, taking small bites of my cheese sandwich. I kept my eyes down, not wanting to catch the eyes of any of the people staring at me. I heard the clatter of a tray being dropped on the other side of the table, and I looked up to find a small redhead. "Hi," she gave me a small wave. I nodded at her, food in my mouth. "Do you mind if I sit here?" she asked, and I shook my head. She sat down. I remembered seeing her in the English class that morning. She had a small round face. She was really pretty. She seemed calm, her hair being the only wild thing about her. I swallowed my food. "Tamara Grace." "Kira," she smiled, "she had even white teeth. Everybody's talking about you, you know." I gritted my teeth. "Yeah, I feel like a walking lab experiment." She laughed. "It's not your fault. We haven't had a new student here in years. You moved into Harry's old house, right?" "Who?" "The last new student we had. Cream House, at the edge of town, right?" "Yeah, how long have you lived here?" "I was born here," she shrugged. "Lucky. I had never stayed in a town longer than a year because of my dad's job. I didn't know how it felt to have childhood friends and all that." The bell rang. "What class do you have now?" I checked my schedule. "Art. I have geography, but the art room is on my way." She hooked her arm in mine. "Come on, I'll show you." The art teacher was young, her name was Lisa, and she wanted to be addressed that way. I loved art. It was practically the only class I felt at home in. This time, I'd chosen a table at the back. I didn't like people seeing what I created. I pulled out my sketchbook and the other stuff I would need. There were 11 of us in the class, and everybody had a table partner but me. The door burst open and my heart stopped. He nodded at the teacher, and she didn't say anything about his being late. He scanned the room and tried to sink lower on my stool, but it was practically impossible to hide in a room of 11 people. His eyes stopped on me and he smirked before making his way over. "Oh Jesus, please, please, please don't let him sit beside me." His bag landed on the floor next to mine, and he balanced on the stool, and butterflies erupted in my stomach. Lisa started explaining what she wanted us to do today. "What's your name?" I still then continued moving my pencil on the paper, as if I hadn't heard him. Out of the corner of my eye I saw him reach for my bag, and I dropped the pencil and snatched my bag up, hugging it. "What do you want?" I whispered, not wanting to disturb the other people. "She talks," he muttered. "What's your name?" "Tamara Grace," I snapped. "Now leave me alone." After that, we did our work in silence and I let myself go. When the bell went, I snapped back to reality and looked at what I had created. I sighed when I saw that it was the same drawing that had dominated my sketchbook in the last year. A pair of grey eyes surrounded by darkness. I slammed the book shut. I didn't need the grey-eyed boy next to me seeing that. His bag was packed, but he seemed to be waiting for me. I picked up my bag, and ignoring him, walked out of the class, glad the day was over. He easily caught up with me. "Where do you live?" I sighed knowing he wasn't going to leave me alone, apparently Harry's old house. I saw his jaw set, and his face became hard. "Are you okay?" I asked. He relaxed. Yeah. "Let me take you home." Yeah, like Daddy wouldn't already make me fast and pray for 7 days if he saw me walking and talking with a boy without the boy bringing me home. "No thanks. I'm good. Come on." He grabbed my hand and started pulling me outside. "Leave me alone." I paused, realizing I didn't know his name. "Gray," he said. "Like his eyes." I pulled my hand out of his grip. "You are not taking me home." "Why not?" He seemed genuinely confused. I scoffed. "He's gotta be kidding because I don't know you." He stiffened. I didn't wait to hear what he had to say. I turned around and headed in the direction of home. I heard footsteps behind me. "Why are you following me?" "Look, I won't walk beside you or anything. I just want to make sure you get home safe." He was stubborn. And that's how we went. He didn't disturb me. The only indication he was still behind me has the shadow I saw on the ground, not far from mine. I stopped when I got to the last bend before my house. I didn't want to take the risk of either of my parents seeing him behind me. "Bye, Gray." His eyes softened. He seemed sad. "Bye, Gracie." "Gracie." He called me Gracie. 3, Gracie. I heard a voice call out from behind me. "Gracie." The gray eyes in my dream yesterday now came with a voice. They said Gracie. I waited for him to catch up with me. He had a lopsided grin on his face. He wore black jeans and a black hoodie. His dark hair was messy, but it suited him perfectly. "Hey," he greeted, throwing an arm around my shoulders. I shrugged it off, but he put it right back. The butterflies in my stomach started dancing. I started walking and he continued beside me. "Hi. You get home okay yesterday?" I rolled my eyes. "What, I was supposed to get kidnapped since I didn't have you shadowing me?" He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. The group of people I'd seen him with when I had entered the English class yesterday waved him over. "Your friends want you." He shrugged. "They can wait." One of the boys shouted his name and he frowned at them. "Sit with us at lunch." I noticed we were drawing a lot of attention. People were staring at us and whispering. Did the people at this school seriously have nothing better to do? "Why in the world would I sit with you?" He removed his arm and faced me. "Because we are friends. It's something friends do." I narrowed my eyes at him. "I just met you yesterday." He sighed and put both his hands on my shoulders, stooping to look me in the eye. "See Moon Gracie." He paused. "Please." I sighed. What was seriously the worst that could happen? "Fine, okay, great." Then he pulled me into him, wrapping his arms around me. The butterflies were definitely throwing a party, with all the fluttering they were doing. I felt my face go hot. Then I felt him sniffing my hair. "What on earth? Did you just sniff my hair?" I felt him nodding yep. Then he did it again, and a small groan came from him. I felt like pulling him back when he let me go. "Okay, seriously, what is happening to me?" "Bye," he said, going to meet his friends. "See you in English." I nodded. Okay, what in the world just happened? I just let a boy touch me. 2 days in this place and I'd hugged a boy. Daddy would flip a lid if he knew. He'd say I was going to rot in hell. I don't want to rot in hell. What the hell was that? Kira said, startling me. Oh hey, Kira. Good morning to you too. My night was lovely, thanks for asking. I said sarcastically. She rolled her eyes. Come on. You were just talking and hugging the old grey. What did she stop herself from saying? The grey. Her eyes darted sideways. Yeah. She was definitely hiding something. I was going to say the hottest guy in school but I didn't press it. Again, what the hell was that? I shrugged. Nothing, baby, that certainly wasn't nothing. He just wanted me to sit with him at lunch. She stopped and turned to look at her. What's up? And you said no, right? What? You told him no? Her voice was strained. Right. No, I didn't. I frowned. What's up, Kira? She sighed and took my hand. That family is cursed. You should stay away from him. Yeah, sure, whatever. Kira was the only friend I'd made here, and I didn't want to fight with her, lose her over some boy. Gray was late to English class even though he'd been in school before me, which I found weird, and the seat beside me where he sat the day before had already been taken by some jock. The first game of the season was tonight, and the football players were all wearing their varsity jackets with Wolves printed boldly on the back, and when Gray walked in, he was sporting one too. My goodness. He plays football too. I noticed a scowl creep onto his face when he noticed somebody was already beside me before heading to the only remaining seat at the back of the class, and I exhaled in relief. Now I just needed to get out of sitting with him at lunch. Gray's POV. I leaned on the wall beside Gracie's AP Physics class, watching all the other nerds pouring out of the class. I knew when she was coming when I smelt her. My God, I love her scent. I jumped right in her path when she appeared, making her drop her books. Great, she scares easily. Sarcasm. What are you doing here? She immediately asks. This is exactly why I've always dreaded having a human mate. I've always mocked the few of my friends that ended up with human mates. Karma's a fucking bitch. It's so stressful to actually have to go through the stress of getting the girl to fall for you before you can tell her that you're a wolf and all. I knew this girl would be especially hard because she wasn't fawning over me like the rest of the school female population, both human and wolf. Great thing I'm not the next to be alpha. That responsibility fell on the person who wanted it, and I'm eternally grateful to the moon goddess. I'm here to take you to lunch, I stated, taking her arm. She pulled her arm out of my grasp. About that. I'm sorry, but I can't sit with you. Great. Fucking Kira had filled her head with rubbish. You promised. She didn't. But for a girl like her, her word actually means something to her. We had reached the cafeteria doors now. I know, I'm really sorry, but something came up. And with that she crossed the room to a certain redhead, who was glaring at me. I didn't go after her. It's bad enough I actually had to beg her this morning. I went over to my table and sat at the end of the bench beside Mason. Good luck with that one, man, he said, smirking. I know, right, Ryan said from the other side of the table. She's one hot piece of ass, though, earning him a glare from me. Why's she not sitting with us? Mason asked. Fucking Kira. I grabbed his can of soda and crushed it, oblivious to the soda fizz pouring all over my hand. Kira. 4. Gray's POV. The art class was relatively silent, with only the sounds of brushes on easels and pencil on paper. Gracie was beside me, totally focused on her work and completely ignoring me. I always thought when I found my mate it was going to be fucking awesome. Having somebody love you no matter how many times you screw up, not having to be afraid they'd cheat on you. But here I am. With a human for a mate. I don't hate her, quite the opposite. But it hurts to have your soul joined with somebody else's, and love them so much, and not have the same love returned. It hurts. It hurts when I have to shadow her when I want to be right beside her, holding her hand. It hurt that I had to beg her to even be around me. It hurt when she chose to sit with Kira over me. It hurts when we're sitting right beside each other, and she pretends I'm not there. I hate that it hurts. The last bell rings and I look down at my sketchbook, not surprised to see yet another drawing of Gracie. I hate that I'm acting so weak just 'cause some girl isn't paying me attention. But then she's not just some girl. I shove my stuff into my bag before turning to her. You ready? I don't need you escorting me. So, thanks, but no thanks. She rolled her eyes and slung her bag over her shoulder. I didn't bother replying. I was following her whether she liked it or not. She huffed when she realized I wasn't backing off and headed out of the class. I smirked and followed her. Dude, meeting at the pack house. Let's go. Mason stopped me as I got off the building. Gracie, a few yards ahead. I'll meet you there. I have something to do. I weaved through the students in the car park until I was just a few meters behind the blonde. So, where did you move here from? I asked as we got out of the school compound. No reply. Ah, okay. Do you have any siblings? I tried again. Still no reply. Gracie. She whipped around and marched up to me. Don't call me that. I don't have to answer to you. I don't know what you're trying to do with me, but I have a fair idea. I'm not one of those girls. So, please leave me alone. You have a game this evening, so go and practice or something. She is so pretty. I realize she just told me off, called me a player and told me to stay away from her, but all I noticed was how absolutely beautiful she was. Dude, where are you? The meeting's about to start. Mason mind-linked me and snapped me out of my thoughts, and then her words actually settled. I gritted my teeth. She was already way ahead of me, but I easily caught up to her. Look, Grace. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to do anything with you. I just want to be friends. I'm sorry for following you and all. I don't think you're one of those girls. I really don't, Grace. I paused. If you want me to stay away from you, I will. There were so many lies in my little speech. I am trying to do something with her. I'm not sorry for following her. I certainly don't just want to be friends, and I sure as hell won't stay away from her. She paused and then continued walking again, without looking at me. I still followed her. When we got to the last bend to her house, she stopped and turned to me. Mississippi. She said I moved here from Mississippi. And then she turned the corner. I stood there for a while and made sure she actually entered her house. Gray? Calm your pants down, Mace. I'm neither the alpha nor the alpha to be. The meeting can start without me. I mind-linked back before heading into the woods and shifting. The meeting had started by the time I got home. My dad was up in front of the pack, and beside him was my brother Jared. He stopped talking when I entered and everybody's eyes were on me. Jared shot me a frown. I ignored them and went to stand beside Ryan and Mason. My father, also known as Alpha Jackson, continued whatever he had been saying. We have set the date for the ceremony to be 2 weeks from today, where I will be handing over alpha duties to my son Jared. Everybody clapped. And he and his beautiful mate, Chloe, will be crowned the alpha and lunar of the Red Water Moon Pack. More applause. In other news, the new alpha of the Red Water Pack has invited us to his territory to renew our peace treaty with him, and a few of us will be leaving this weekend. The Red Water Pack was the pack in the next town over. Story is that there had been a terrible war between their pack and ours many years ago, and the elders eventually intervened with a peace treaty, which we had to renew once every year, or when a new alpha comes into power. I tuned out as I usually do at these meetings, and plugged my earbuds into my ear. Mason nudged me when the meeting was over. Where were you? I shrugged. I had something to do. With Gracie, Ryan sang, wiggling his eyebrows. Shut up, I snapped, and don't call her that. He ignored me and turned to Mason. You know, it's still early, but I can tell he's going to be totally whipped. I rolled my eyes. You're going to have to start acting more responsibly, Jared said, coming up to us. I didn't need his shit right now. I stuck a smile on my face. That's your role, remember, brother. You're the alpha. He smirked, his black hair, neatly gelled back with not a strand out of place, gray. I have a game to get to. I pushed past him and went up to my room. I took a quick shower before the guys and I got in my car and headed back to school. And as I got onto field, realizing how much I'd missed the euphoria that came with being on a football field with lots of people cheering you on, I looked up into the bleachers and I stopped in my tracks. Because there she was, smiling right at me. Gracie. 5. Grace's POV. I tried to push the guilt out of me as I snacked on a container of Pringles and tried to focus on my passage for the day. Yep. My parents gave me a passage from the Bible to read every day and later discuss at dinner. Today's something about obedience. I read the first verse for the millionth time, but it still wasn't sticking in my brain. All I could think about was how mean I'd been to Gray. He was the only other person at the school that had even tried to talk to me after Kira, and look how I was behaving. I closed the Bible and put my head in my hands. I was such a people pleaser, I really didn't know how to relax when I know I've hurt somebody. I made a snap decision and covered the Pringles container and licked the salt off my fingers. I'd never been to a football game in my life. My mother said it was a sport for boys, and she saw no reason why a good girl would want to watch boys. I met Mum in the kitchen stirring something on the stove. Dad wasn't back from work yet. "Hey sweetie," she said when she noticed me. "Help me shred the cabbage, will you?" I carried the ball from the counter to the sink to wash it first. I had no idea how to even begin this conversation. "So Mum, there's a football game in school tonight." That's nice." She flicked the spoon over her palm and tasted it. "Kira is going." At least that was true. My parents already heard about Kira at the dinner table the night before. Everybody talked about their day at the table. I hadn't mentioned Gray, though. "We haven't met Kira." "She's good. I promise Mum." I decided to just come right out with it. "Can I please go to the game?" She was chopping tomatoes now. She didn't answer me. "Mum?" She put the knife down and finally looked at me. "Tamara Grace, what business do you have at a football game?" "Huh? You wore jeans yesterday and now this. We only just moved here and you're already rebelling." I lowered my head. She was right. I was about to go to a football game just because of a boy. I'm sorry. I had finished shredding the cabbage. I dried my hands on a dish towel and went back up to my room. I sat down at my desk and picked up the Bible. I had finally gotten to the 7th verse when my phone dinged with a new message. I never got messages. I swiped at the screen. Unknown. "Hey B. Please tell me you coming to the game." It wasn't that hard to figure out who it was after reading the message, considering I had only just given Kira my number that day. I quickly saved her number before replying. "Me, my mum said no." "Sorry." Her reply was almost instantaneous. "Seek moon. You seriously can't be thinking of missing the first game." Me, well, I don't even have a choice. I'd have to pass my mum to get out the front door. "See, well, then go out the window." Me, what? "See, well, if I remember correctly, there should be a huge oak tree right outside the window in your room." Me, whoa. Stalker much? "See, I remember from when Harry lived there." "Climb out your window." I laughed. Me? Climb out of a window? I was the biggest klutz there was. I sometimes tripped on literally nothing but my own 2 feet. And to think I had thought this girl wasn't wild. Me, sorry, see, but I didn't put breaking my bones on my schedule for today. See, come on, Mara. Me, when did you start calling me Mara? See now. Don't change the subject. I sighed. One part of me really wanted to go to the game, but another part, the good Christian girl part, wanted me to stay at home and study my Bible. And I knew which side I had to listen to. Me, I'm sorry, C. I'll have to skip this game. C, fine. I didn't know you were so antisocial. I flopped down on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I'd been called worse things than antisocial, so it didn't really bother me. But there was this nagging feeling that I was missing something. I'd never really felt like I was missing out when I watched my friends in my previous schools go out and have boyfriends and get drunk. I actually pitied them. They were going down the road to hell and they didn't know it. But it was my final year in school, and I had never been to a party, or even just hung out with friends after school hours. Grace, honey, dinner's ready, but finish studying your Bible verses before you come down, my mum yelled up the stairs. And then I made a decision that I might or might not have regretted. I changed into my one pair of jeans and a grey t-shirt, and I climbed out my window. I didn't break anything. I did a little dance of victory before heading in the direction of the school. I began to doubt myself as I walked down the dark road lighted only by the three-quarter moon that was poking its head slowly out of the grey clouds. The tall trees cast shadows on the road. I instinctively walked a bit faster, muttering Psalm 23. I calmed down when I saw the bright lights of the school. I stopped and stared at it. I knew I was going to get caught. It was inevitable. My mother would come to my room to call me for dinner when my father got home, and then she would discover I was gone. I could still get out of trouble if I turned and ran back home now. Well, I didn't. I followed a bunch of girls onto the field. It was bright, really bright. I found a seat and searched the field. Even though I didn't want to admit it to myself, I was looking for one boy in particular. The girls I'd followed from the parking lot ended up sitting right behind me. When the players all came onto the field, I instantly recognized him. He was the tallest one there. Then, almost as if he knew I was there, his eyes met mine and he smiled. I found myself smiling back. I don't know how long we were staring at each other, but the trance was broken when I felt arms wrap around me. Mara. You came. Kira squealed, hugging me. I was usually a hugger, but it was way too sudden. She pulled back. No broken bones, eh? We laughed. The game began. After a lot of shoving and running, the game was over with our school declared the winners. The crowd around me erupted in cheers. Kira cheered along with them, but I just sat there, feeling very out of place. I decided to do what I came to the game to do in the first place. Apologize to Gray. I told Kira to wait for me and descended the bleachers. I found him easily again, only this time, he wasn't surrounded by big, tall teenage boys, he was surrounded by short, squealing teenage girls, and he looked to be soaking up all the attention. I bit my lip and debated if I should go up to him. Ugh, this is stupid. I'll just apologize to him tomorrow. Grouchy Grace. He pushed his was out of the circle of fans and jogged up to me. Hey. You came, he grinned. He was sweaty and his curly hair stuck on his forehead. Hi, I smiled. I guess I did. I took a deep breath. Look, I'm sorry for early. It's okay, he cut me off. No, it's not. He cut me off again. I mean it. You don't have to apologize. I understand where you were coming from, so I hesitated. The boy wasn't all that bad. It couldn't hurt to give him a chance. Even if I would have to keep him from my parents. Friends. If it was possible, his grin became even wider. Definitely. Somebody clapped Gray on his back. Congrats, man. Celebration at Joe's. I'll meet y'all there. He turned to me. You wanna come to Joe's with me? Joe's was the name of the only diner in town. I was in enough trouble at home, as was no thanks. I'll head on home. Do you want a ride? I actually did. As much as I didn't want to get in a car alone with him, I didn't want to walk home alone now that it was even darker. Yes, please. Let me tell Kira. I ran back up to Kira. Hey, Gray's taking me home. I can ask him to drop you off too if you want. I saw her eyes look over my shoulder and then back to me. No, go on with your Prince Charming. I'm going to Joe's. And then she left. I really didn't understand why she had such a big problem with Gray. Are you ready? Gray said from behind me. Yep. His car was surprisingly clean and fresh smelling. I don't know why, but I expected much worse. I snapped my seatbelt on. We were going a short distance, but I never took seatbelts for granted. So, did you enjoy the game? I'm going to pretend I totally understood what was going on the field and say yes. He laughed. Not a fan, huh, Grace? Gracie. I didn't like the way Grace came out of his mouth. I guess I was already kinda used to Gracie. He smiled. The rest of the drive was in silence, and when the car finally stopped at the corner, I wished the ride was longer. In the romance books I hid under my bed, they'd have said it was because I wanted to spend more time with him. Nope. I knew my parents were waiting on the other side of that door, and I was going to be swimming in a bowl of hot soup as soon as I stepped in. I stared at the house, building up the courage to actually walk up to it. Everything okay? Gray was looking at me with concern. Yeah, I said uncertainly. Yeah, I said again. It would be fine. They couldn't kill me, they were my parents. Right? I opened the car door. Why? By Gracie. Okay, I definitely preferred Gracie. My feet felt like lead as I walked to the door. My father's truck was parked in the driveway. I twisted the knob slowly. My eyes met 4 furious ones. The road to hell is wide and big, Grace. Hi people. I hope you're enjoying the story so far. I love to hear from you. Please vote and comment. XO January 6th. The road to hell is wide and big, Grace. I gulped. My father was on the sofa, with his legs propped up on the coffee table, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, while my mother was perched on the edge of the armchair. Where have you been, Grace? He asked, the dark liquid swishing around in his glass. With my father. Once the whiskey was out, the trouble began. I considered lying, saying I went for a walk, but I wasn't sure I would be able to answer the follow-up question of why I left out my window. School. My mouth was dry. He chuckled. And what did you go to do at school? There was a game. I cleared my throat. A football game. He sipped from his glass. And what have your mother and I told you about football games? My heart was thumping, my voice came out in a squeak. Good girls don't go there. Are you a good girl, Grace? I really did not want to answer that for 2 reasons. I felt that it was a trick question. 2, with my recent affiliations with Gray, I wasn't sure saying yes would be being honest. He drained his glass and slammed the glass so hard on the table that I was surprised it didn't shatter. I asked you a question. He shouted suddenly, making me jump. Why yes. He chuckled and then very slowly stood up. What is the 5th commandment? I was shaking. I looked over at my mother, silently pleading with her to help me, but she just looked away. I don't like repeating my questions. He roared, oh, obey your father and your mother. He started making his way toward me so that your days will be long. He chuckled again, as he stopped right in front of me. Do you think your days will be long? He was closer to me now, so I didn't want to risk getting him angry. I quickly shook my head. No. He roared in my face, you're going to die. And then when you die, you're going straight to hell. I shook as tears ran out of my eyes. All this for a boy. 3 days fasting and prayer. You're only allowed to drink water. And then he went upstairs. I was still trembling, my head ached. I felt arms wrap around me. Sweetie, don't cry. You know he only wants the best for you. I hugged her back, comforting myself with the sweet smell of coconuts in her hair. When I calmed down, I dragged myself up to bed, and even though I wanted to fall right asleep, I got on my knees and prayed. It was lunchtime and I had no idea what to do. I couldn't go to the cafeteria because I was fasting and I knew Kira would ask me questions I didn't want to answer. Speaking about Kira, I didn't know what to think about her anymore. She seemed to have a slightly mean side. Calling me antisocial just because I was saying I didn't want to sneak out, and then the bitterness on her face when I told her Gray was taking me home. I found myself at the doors of the cafeteria and sighing. I turned around and went to look for somewhere to spend the next hour. Gray's POV: I hadn't seen Gracie today, and my wolf wasn't letting me rest. I half listened to whatever Ryan was going on about and focused on the door, waiting to catch a glimpse of her. My wolf started jumping for joy when we spotted her at the doors. She stood there for a while as if contemplating coming in, then abruptly turned and left. Frowning, I got up and went after her. By the time I got to the hallway, there was no trace of her, but her scent was still there. And so was my ex-girlfriend Lily. Lily has always been my idea of perfect. Long legs, curly black hair and blue eyes. I was quite disappointed when I turned 16 and found out that she wasn't my mate. After that, I just prayed to the moon goddess for my mate to look exactly like Lily. Gracie didn't. "Hey G-Bear," she greeted, blocking my path. Hey, I had missed her. Not as my girlfriend, but simply as a friend. Lily and I had been friends since we were 2. Our mothers were and still are best friends, which made for some pretty awkward dinners after we had broken up. After the breakup, things just never went back to normal between us. We were still friends, just not as close as we were before we dated. I was hoping I'd run into you. She looped her arm in with mine. To say my wolf didn't care for her touching me would be the understatement of the century, so I gently took my arm out of hers only for her to grab it right back. "I have some things to discuss with you. Can it wait?" "I have to." No, come on." She started pulling me towards the cafeteria. "No. I have to go look for somebody." I raised my voice, but immediately regretted it when I saw the look on her face. She dropped my arm like a hot potato. "Oh, okay. I'm sorry." Her face was scrunched up as she turned around to go. I sighed and grabbed her hand. "Sorry. What did you want to talk about?" Her face immediately brightened up, and her perfect smile, that has always warmed my heart, made its way onto her face, and I followed her into the cafeteria. "Oh, shut up. Lily'll only take a minute, then we'll go and look for our mate," I reasoned with my wolf, who seemed to think he could just dig his way out and go and look for Gracie on his own. "Or maybe I'll just see her in art." 7. Gray. She wasn't in art. I sat still, eyes trained on the door, not bothering to attempt any painting. Her scent was there, and it was fresh, which means she did come to the class at some point. I was really hoping she was just in the bathroom. The minutes tick by and still no sign of her. "Fuck this. I'm going to the bathroom," I announced to the teacher rather than ask, and she just smiled. I really did head to the bathroom, just hoping that for some reason she was there, but before I even opened the door I knew my mate wasn't in there. Did she go home? She had skipped lunch. Maybe she wasn't well. Arg, it's impossible to figure out how girls' minds work. For all I knew, she was just on some diet or something. Wouldn't hurt to check her house though. I went out through the side entrance to the school that most students, especially the humans, didn't even know existed, and practically sprint towards Gracie's house. There was no car parked outside, so I took it her parents weren't home. I considered taking a chance and knocking on the front door, but even I knew it would be weird for me to just show up. I figured out Harry's old bedroom must be hers now. I let out an involuntary growl thinking about Harry. The bastard. I headed round to what I assumed was her window. Her scent was strong, so I knew she was in there. There was an old oak tree right outside her window. I looked around to make sure there were no nosy neighbors to call the police about a boy peeping in a girl's window. It was still pretty early though, kids were still in school and parents were at their jobs. Reassured, when I didn't see anybody, I swiftly jumped onto the branch directly outside her window, being careful to hide behind some big leaves, and looked in. She was sitting at her desk, her long hair flowing down her back, bent over some book. So she skipped class to study. As if she sensed me watching her, her head snapped back and I quickly ducked out of sight. She seemed to go back to her book, but then stood up and shut her curtains. All right, I get the hint. I'm going already. I jumped back on the ground soundlessly, and decided to just go home. Your father said to see him immediately you get home, the guard said as I walked into the house. I don't have time for the old man right now, I said and started to walk away, but he blocked my path. Your father said to see him immediately you get home, he repeated like a robot. What did he want now? I headed to his office, shoving the guard with my shoulder as I walked past him. You ordered, I said, walking into his office without knocking. He didn't look up from the papers he was studying. Sit down, Grayson. I'd much rather remain standing if you don't mind. And my name's Gray. He looked up then and met my eye. Sit down. As much as I would have loved to walk out of that room, this life, and slam the door on my way out, even I knew when not to mess with him. He's still the alpha. I flopped onto one of the chairs in front of his desk. Why were you late to yesterday's meeting? Is that what this is about? I had stuff to do. No way in hell, I was telling him about Gracie. You are not a child anymore, Grayson. You have to start taking your responsibilities seriously. I couldn't help but laugh. He had got to be kidding. Well, Alpha, let me remind you, I am just a pack member, not one of the pack leaders. I have no special responsibilities to this pack. I showed up, didn't I? He growled. Do not forget who you are talking to. I assume I have been properly scolded. I'll take my leave. He didn't stop me as I walked out of his office. Responsibilities. Fucking hilarious. Gracie. My stomach growled loudly, disturbing the peace of the library, and I sipped some more of my bottled water. This wasn't my first fast, but I had never felt this hungry before. I remembered I hadn't eaten since the previous day's lunch, and even then I'd had only a banana. Yuga, I groaned as pain shot through my stomach. I'd already missed most of my classes and I figured it was time for art now. I stuffed the calculus textbook I'd been trying to study into my bag and proceeded to drag myself to the art class. I thought about stopping by the nurse's office to get something for my stomach pain, but she'd probably want to know when last I'd eaten. I walked into the class and flopped onto my stool. Not surprisingly, Gray was nowhere to be found. I clutched my stomach as pain shot through it again. I couldn't do this. I really couldn't. I couldn't sit upright for the next hour. Luckily the art teacher hadn't arrived yet. I walked right back out of the class and headed home. Tamara, Grace. Mum called out as I closed the front door. Yeah, she stuck her head out of the kitchen. Why are you back so early? Are you sick? My stomach hurts. Oh honey, she went into the kitchen and then re-emerged, drying her hands slightly on her apron. Sorry. You just have 2 more days of fasting. She placed her slightly damp hand on my forehead. You'll be fine. Why don't you go upstairs and study your passage? Mum, can I just eat something? Just a little, I won't tell Dee. She immediately stepped back from me, her eyes hardening. Tamara, Grace. I believe I raised you better than this. I don't know why you believe I would sin against God and disobey my husband. Go to your room and study your passage. Your father will be in to discuss it with you after we have dinner. It was clear the conversation was over. I don't even know why I tried honestly. She didn't give me any food when I was 6 and had to fast for 2 days for mistakenly breaking a plate. Why would she give me now? 1 day down. 2 to go. 8, Gracie. Okay, my first week of school wasn't that bad. I met a boy who makes my stomach flutter weirdly, made a friend, snuck out of the house to a game, rode in a car with said stomach-fluttering boy, got caught, fasted. And yeah, that's all. Who am I kidding? That's more action than I've gotten in my 4 years in high school. I sigh. It's been a long week. I cheer up when I remember today is the last day of my fast, which meant I got dinner tonight. My stomach grumbled at the thought of food. The gentle scuffing of shoe against pavement reminded me that I was not alone. Yep, Gray walked me home for the remainder of the week after nearly chewing my head off for leaving school early on Wednesday. He had seemed genuinely worried about me. To be honest, Gray hadn't turned out to be what I expected at all. He was nice and really hadn't tried to force me into anything. He kept his distance, but I still always felt his eyes on me. I stopped and turned to look at him. What have him the right to be so cute? Gracie, are you okay? I realized I was still staring at him. Let's walk together. His eyes brightened and he full-on grinned before quickly striding to my side. We continued in the direction of my house. How was your first week? He asks. It was different. I chose my words carefully. At least I made a friend. Oh come on, he pouted. I'm your friend too. He was even cuter with a pout. I laughed. You are. I'm your best friend, Gracie. The butterflies in my stomach had to be throwing a party. Whoa, next thing I know you'll be weaving friendship bracelets, I teased. Sure. I certainly haven't started already. He darted his eyes around, acting nervous. Gray? I laughed and he stared at me, his eyes wide. What? Nothing, he stuttered, looking away. See, Moon, why were you staring at me like that? It's just you said my name so. I had called him by his name before, hadn't I? I like it, I smiled. We were already at the last corner before my house. All right, I'll see you on Monday. He looked sad. Yeah, sure. Bye, Gray. I emphasized his name. He smiled, showing his teeth. Adios, Gracie. I felt his eyes on me until I stepped through my front door. Gray? Gray, where have you been? Jared shot as I walked into the house. He and a couple of the pack leaders, as well as my father, were gathered in the living room, getting ready to leave for the Red Water pack. I ignore him, heading for the stairs. Grayson. I smile genuinely when I notice she's in the room as well. Good afternoon, Mum. I chuckle when I have to practically bend to kiss her cheek. I'll never get over how small she is. How was school, dear? She tilts her head up to look at me. It was school. How else would it be? She laughed. Come on. I hear there's something you've been keeping from me. I let her lead me away from the room and outside to the garden. Me? I said, acting shocked. Why would I be crazy enough to keep something from my own mother? Really? So when were you planning on telling me you found your mate? Fudge. Soon. I was honestly going to tell her, but I wasn't sure she wouldn't be so excited that she'd tell my father. How did you find out? From somebody who cared enough about me to keep me in the loop, she teased. Fucking Mason. I was going to tell you, Mum, honestly. Yeah, whatever. Why haven't you brought her over yet? Or have I met her? Is she from our pack? Her excitement was literally bouncing off the walls. Calm down. I laughed. You'll meet her soon, you know, when she starts letting me even touch her. She wrinkled her nose. All right then. I've got to go say goodbye to your father. I watched her go. I wondered how she would react if I told her my mate was human. I'd never been sure about my mother's view on humans. For her, it depended on the situation. For my father, however, well, let's just say he didn't plan to be best friends with one anytime soon. Nor father-in-law. I sighed and headed to my room. I wasn't going to watch everybody wish my father a safe journey. The man could die for all I cared. I ate dinner alone that night. My mother was wallowing in her room since my father was gone, and none of the pack members decided to come to the dining room since their alpha and pack leaders weren't around. I hated how everybody's lives seemed to revolve around him. I wolfed down my large portion of spaghetti that somebody had thankfully prepared for me quickly. I didn't want anybody to meet me in here and try to make small talk. After finishing dinner, I went out onto the back porch. I couldn't shake this feeling I had, as if something bad was about to happen. The night was lovely, with a million bright stars spreading out over our house and the forest that lay behind it. Everywhere was calm, the water in the pool was practically screaming my name. I wondered if Gracie knew how to swim. I smirked, it certainly would be fun to teach her. Holding her waist, trying to get her to float. Normally just thinking about my little mate would calm me, but it wasn't working. Something was happening, I just hoped it wasn't to Gracie. I shuddered, thinking about somebody harming her. I pulled my tank top over my head and my cargo pants off, leaving me in just my boxers, and dived right into the deep end of the pool. I savored the effect of the cool water on my body. I didn't know how long I was in there before I heard Ryan mind-linking me. What he said made me rush towards the house without bothering to put my clothes back on. Most of the pack was gathered in the living room around someone. They all moved out of the way, and immediately my eyes fell on the person they were all gathered around. My heart fell. No, Gray, no, this can't be happening. I'm sorry, Gray, but they are dead. 9. Gray? No. Gray, no. What are you talking about? How could they die? We were ambushed. I'm sorry, but they were just too many and you don't know what you are talking about. I shook my head, backing away. He doesn't know what he's talking about. They were all looking at me like I was some wounded pup or something. I needed to get out of there. I took off running, shifting and shredding my clothes in the process. Once I was out of the door, I raced towards the woods. My father, my brother. They weren't people I really liked. Okay, to be honest, I detested them, but I didn't want them to die. Mum was going to be devastated and I knew I was a huge coward for not making sure I was there to comfort her when she heard. I slowed down when I recognized where I was. I was at the corner before Gracie's house. I didn't know how I had gotten there, but now I could see her house in the distance. I trotted slowly towards it, making sure to keep in the shadows. It was pretty late and very few people were awake, but I still had to be careful. Exactly, Gracie was most definitely asleep. What in the world was I doing here? The light in her room was still on. Was she awake? What was she doing up so late? Is she okay? I raced up the tree and tried my best to hide myself in the trees. It wasn't easy, but thankfully, my fur was midnight black, so I melted into the darkness easily. Gracie was sitting at her table. Did she spend her whole time there? She didn't seem to be reading anything this time, though. She was just staring blankly at the wall, her head in her hands. What was she thinking about? Me? You wish. My hearing was extremely good as a wolf, even better at night when the town wasn't so noisy. I heard her sniff and then dab her eyes with a tissue. She was crying. My wolf growled. Neither of us liked the idea of our mate crying. Who the fuck hurt her? I almost jumped into her room hearing her sniffle again, but I remembered I was still in wolf form. A black, giant wolf paying her a visit at night probably wouldn't go down well with her. I didn't realize I was growling so loud until Gracie's head suddenly snapped to the window. Fuck. I didn't have enough time to hide, so she was looking right at me. She squinted and then stood up and walked over to her window, all the while not taking her eyes off me. What the hell do I do? She stood there for a few seconds, staring at me, her mouth dropped open a bit, and then she shut the window and drew her curtains. Well, that was anticlimactic. I honestly didn't expect the reaction. I didn't expect her to invite a wolf in for a cup of tea, but I at least expected her to scream, throw things at me. I mean, she just saw a big black wolf outside her window, staring at her, and what did she do? She shut her window. What if I was a bad were? A window couldn't stop me if I wanted to hurt her. Why didn't she call for help? Does my mate want to get killed? Who does that? Seriously. I could still see her shadow in front of the curtains. She hadn't moved. She stood there for a long time before she finally put her light off. Well, time to get back to reality. I hopped down from the tree and began walking home. I didn't hurry. What was the use? People were dead, there was nothing good to meet at home. The night was oddly still beautiful. I didn't know what I expected, for the clouds to turn grey and rain start pouring down because my father died. Whatever. I got clothes from one of the trees around our house, and once again thanked whoever's idea it was to keep clothes in the forest for emergencies. After getting dressed, I took a deep breath and opened the door. With my wolf hearing, I had heard the chaos from a mile off. My mother was sitting on the floor screaming and thrashing while the people around her were trying to comfort her, and at the same time avoid a kick to the shin. Mum, she stopped immediately she heard my voice. Gray, she stood up. Did you hear? I nodded. She started coming towards me. Her face was shiny with tears and sweat, and her hair was all over the place. It can't be true. Right, Gray. It is not true. He isn't dead, right? Mum, my voice cracked. It hurt me to see her like this. She put her hands on my shoulders, looking up at me. It's not true. Tell me it's not true, Gray. Abel is not dead. Mum, please. It came out barely a whisper. She broke down and began crying again. Come on, it's late. Let me get you to bed. She allowed me to pull her without protest up the stairs and into her room. Just lie down, Mother. She obeyed, collapsing onto her bed. It's not true, she kept muttering. Shhhh, just close your eyes for a minute. Just a minute, she whispered. I stayed until her breathing became steady. She looked exhausted. She adored my father for whatever reason. I really didn't know how she was going to cope without him. I might have hated him, but the entire pack relied on him. What was going to happen now? 10. Gracie. He was acting weird today. From when Gray arrived in school today, late, I knew something was wrong. He barely glanced at me, saying that might sound really selfish, but that had never happened before. He had bags, luggage under his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled. I tried to tell myself that I didn't care. It didn't matter if he wasn't doing okay, because he was finally leaving me alone, which is what I wanted from the beginning, right? Wrong? I don't know what it was, but something kept pulling me towards Gray, and I didn't know why. My heart was aching by lunchtime, and he was the only thing on my mind. Which is why I didn't resist when I found myself waking to his table at lunch. His friends saw me coming and their eyes widened. Okay, maybe this was a bad idea. We weren't even necessarily friends. And I was inviting myself to their table. What if he got angry with me, or made a scene in front of the cafeteria? Well, it was too late to turn back, because I was at their table. Gray's head was on the table, so he hadn't seen me coming. His friends were still staring at me. Hi. Gray's head snapped up, and soon as he heard my voice, I licked my lips nervously. I'll sit down. I had barely finished my question when an arm wrapped around my waist and I found myself in Gray's lap. He wrapped his arms around me and nuzzled my neck. Wait, what? I squirmed and he groaned. What are you doing? Thank you, he whispered into my ear, sniffing my hair and drawing in a long, deep breath. I squirmed again, and he finally let me go as I scrambled onto the bench space beside him. Why was he thanking me? My heart was beating fast. The whole cafeteria was staring at me, at us. That was the closest I'd ever been to a boy. I was seriously ashamed to say I kind of missed the warmth of his body. I'm going to hell. Well, nice to meet you too, babe, one of his friends across the table said, and stretched out his hand. I'm Ryan. I reached out to shake his hand, but Gray grabbed it, and I would say. Growled. At Ryan. Ryan raised his hands and laughed. I was just introducing myself, but I can definitely tell it's going to be fun riling you up. The boy beside Ryan slapped the back of Ryan's head. He hit his head on the ground when he was a baby. Never been the same. I'm Mason, by the way. I smiled and nodded, still not trusting myself to speak in front of 3 boys. Well, aren't you going to tell us your name? I'm perfectly fine with calling you Cupcake, but I have a feeling I might not live much longer after I say it. He looked at Gray out of the corners of his eyes. Oh, sorry. I'm Tamara Grace. Tamara Grace. Ryan tested my name. Can I call you Gracie? A low rumble was heard from beside me. No, you can fucking not. Her name is Tamara. It was the first time Gray had really spoken since I arrived at their table, and my heart fluttered a little. All right. Tamara, you better do something to fix him. His mood's going to kill us before the end of the day. Mason slapped the back of his head again. Let's go. They picked their stuff, Ryan grumbling throughout. Nice to meet you, Tamara Grace. Mason shot over his shoulder as he dragged Ryan out. And then we were alone. Okay, technically not alone since we were in a room full of people, but still we were alone. And I was overly conscious of the fact that Gray hadn't let my hand go since he stopped me from shaking Ryan. My tiny hand was still gripped in his thumb occasionally sweeping over the back of my hand. He was looking straight ahead, and I wished he would let me see his eyes. Are you okay? I asked softly, and then his gray eyes settled on me. The bell rang. I stood up immediately. I hated being late to class. He stood up too. Let's go. I picked up my bag and only then did I realize I hadn't even touched the sandwich I had brought from home. We went out of the cafeteria and into the hallway. Navigation was easy seeing as everybody moved out of the way immediately they saw Gray coming. We turned a corner and stopped outside of the art classroom. You're not coming in? I asked. No. I have some things to do. Oh, I felt angry with myself for the amount of disappointment I felt simply because he wasn't coming to class. I'll see you tonight, and then he was gone before his words really registered. Tonight. 11, Gracie. My foot couldn't stop bouncing as I stuttered, or more accurately, tried to study my passage for the day. Tonight. What in the world had Gray meant by that? Was he coming here? Was I going there? Going where? I didn't even know in what direction his house was. Tamara Grace. Dinner. Great. I was going to have to wing it when my father asked me about the passage because I sure as hell hadn't learnt anything. I closed my Bible and headed downstairs. Just as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard my father's truck pull up. Mom placed the last bowl on the table and stood by the chair, waiting for him to come in. His car door slammed shut and soon after, the front door followed. My mother was the first to react. Honey. Welcome home. She moved forward to help him take his jacket off. How was work today? Those were the exact same words she said every day. Dad grunted in response. His exact response every day. Good evening, Father. He didn't look at me. He never does. He sat down at the head of the table, and my mother and I took our respective places after him. We never sat down before him. The father is the head of the house. Let us pray. Those were always his first words. We linked hands. Father, we thank you for my work today. We thank you that I work hard to provide for my family. We thank you for the food my wife has prepared. Help us not to sin, for we understand sin is paramount to death. Amen. Amen, my mother and I echoed. Dinner was usually silent at the beginning, just clattering of cutlery on the ceramic plates. And then your day? He would ask, invariably while stuffing something into his mouth. I always went first. School was interesting. I was early. We learnt trigonometry and maths. The teacher said I'm a fast learner. I wisely left out the part about sitting at a table with 3 boys at lunch and actually getting hugged by and holding hands with one of them. I much more wisely left out the part of said boy saying something about seeing me tonight. It was for everybody's good. At least that's what I tried to convince my conscience with. Mum said she had cleaned the house and gone to the supermarket before embarking on a 30-minute praying session that afternoon. Nothing new there. More silence. My father never said anything about his day. I finished eating first, seeing as I was starving, having not eaten lunch. I then had to wait for my parents to finish so that we could pray and I could escape to my room. My eyes kept starting to the wooden clock that hung on the wall behind my mother. Tick. 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 Tock. It was night, right? So was Gray on his way. I shook my head at the ridiculousness. He wouldn't know where I lived since I always left him at the corner. Right? Tamara Grace, pray for us. My father's voice jolted me. Even more than usual since I was thinking about something I knew would get me a dry fast for like the rest of my life. I gulped. My mind was dirty, filled with one boy's name, and he wanted me to pray. My mother kicked me under the table. Oh Father Lord, we thank you for this meal, we thank you for my mother who prepared I. My father cleared his throat. I moved it along. We ask for forgiveness, and pray for protection, as we go to bed. Amen. I carried my plate to the kitchen immediately. My father was going to be up soon to ask me questions. I needed to get to studying, and fast. I ran up to my room, closing the door behind me. I turned around and I nearly screamed. Nearly, because I had enough sense to stop myself, just in time, as I recognized who the figure in black was. Gray? I whisper yelled. What are you doing here? How did you get here? How? Slow down, princess, he chuckled. No, no, no. You can't be here. I know, I do know. I mean you cannot be here. My father is coming to my room soon, and he will slaughter me if he finds you here. I heard my father's step on the bottom step. I'd never been so grateful for creaking floorboards. He's coming. You have to get out of here. Where should I go? It irked me that even as my heart was beating a mile a minute, he was still as calm as ever, his hands buried deep in his sweatpants pockets, and that blasted smirk on his face, looking at me as if I was the most amusing thing in the world. I don't know. Just I was on the verge of tears now. My father had reached the top of the stairs. I heard his footsteps coming toward my room. And Gray was still standing there. Please you, I heard my bedroom door open. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.